cabin was still cold when Lyle laid her on the bed. He'd kept the fire going through the night, but it hadn't reached the far side of the room, where she lay curled under his extra coat. He stood by the door now, unsure of what to do. She hadn't spoken much on the ride back, except to say thank you once, her voice so hoarse he'd barely heard it over the wind. She wasn't bleeding anymore, but the bruises on her face and neck were turning deep purple. She looked like someone who'd been forgotten. Lyle wasn't used to company. The last time a woman had stepped foot in this house, his mother had still been alive. That was nearly 12 winters ago. He wasn't much for talking, and he certainly wasn't gentle. Not until yesterday. Yesterday, when a stranger paid him $5 to get the girl off the wagon. $5. That was all she was worth to them. But as soon as he saw her, tangled in that tarp like unwanted cargo, he'd felt something pull tight in his chest. She didn't scream when he lifted her. She didn't even look up. She just went limp in his arms, like someone who'd finally stopped hoping for rescue. Now, hours later, the question sat heavy on his tongue. What had they done to her? He stepped forward slowly, careful not to wake her. The fire crackled behind him, casting soft orange light across the room. Her face looked younger now, peaceful. She couldn't have been more than 19. He noticed her hands, torn knuckles, scratches like she'd been clawing at wood, and around her wrist rope burns. His jaw clenched. She stirred suddenly, eyes fluttering open like she'd heard something. When she saw him, she flinched hard, pulling the coat up to her neck. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said softly, raising both hands like he was taming a wild filly. "Name's Lyle. You're in my home. That's all." She didn't reply. "Can I ask yours?" "Nothing." Then he saw it, the quick glance to the corner. Her eyes darted toward the stove, then the door, then the tiny window like she was planning an escape. "Cold outside," he said gently. "Snowin', actually. You run now, you won't make it a mile." She finally spoke, barely a whisper. "Then why'd you bring me here?" Lyle blinked. "What? If you're not like them, why'd you carry me off the wagon?" Her voice cracked at the word wagon, like it still lived in her throat. Lyle stepped back, sat down on the wooden chair near the table. "I was hired to drag you off," he said plainly. "Didn't know what I was walking into." He paused. "But the second I saw you, I knew no man with a heart could leave you there." She didn't answer. "You were tied, hurt, tossed under sacks like you were meat," he said. "I don't know what you went through, and I won't ask unless you want to tell me. But I ain't gonna treat you like they did." Something flickered in her eyes. Not trust, not yet, but maybe disbelief. He reached over to the stove and ladled some stew into a bowl. "Set it on the table. Eat when you're ready." She waited until he turned away to step down from the bed, one trembling foot at a time. She moved like her joints had forgotten how. Still in his coat, her hair tangled over her face, she crept to the bowl, picked up the spoon, and began to eat like someone afraid it might be her last meal. Lyle watched quietly. She only got 3 bites in before she froze. "Your horse," she said suddenly. He blinked. "What about her?" "Paint mare. She's got a limp." Lyle tilted his head. "How'd you know that?" "I heard it. When you carried me," she whispered. "Her back leg drags in the snow." Lyle looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since she arrived. She wasn't just some broken girl. She noticed things. Even in the worst moment of her life, tied up and tossed like cargo, she noticed a lame horse. He cleared his throat. "Her name's Junebug," he said. "Got kicked by a mule last fall. Never healed right." She nodded once. Then finally, with a whisper, "My name's Marion." Eli had never carried a woman before. Not like that. Not like a bride. Not like someone precious. Her name, she'd whispered as they crossed the field, was Willa. Just Willa. The name sat heavy and soft in his mind, like the sound of wind passing over old grass. She hadn't said much else, just that name. And now, she was lying on the old bed in the corner of his cabin, her bruised hands folded over her stomach, eyes darting with confusion and shame. She hadn't looked him in the eye once since he set her down. He didn't ask anything of her. He brought her water, a clean blanket, and stepped out onto the porch, where the land rolled quiet in all directions. He'd done a lot of things for money, broke horses, cleared land, hauled bodies from shootouts in the dry gullies. But carrying her had felt different, like the earth had watched him do it, like something ancient had shifted in the dust. He hadn't expected her to cry, but just before he stepped out, he'd caught the tremble in her chin. Silent tears, the kind shed by someone who wasn't used to kindness. That kind of grief always landed slow, like snow, not rain. The next morning, he rose before the sun, just as the sky started bleeding into gold. He lit the stove quietly this time and let the coffee boil while he chopped wood out back. When he returned, she was standing, barefoot, wrapped in the blanket, watching the fire like it might burn a hole into another world. "I'll leave," she said before he could speak. Her voice cracked like someone not used to speaking. "You're not in my way," he answered. She blinked. "That why you carried me?" "No," he poured her coffee into a tin cup and set it near her. "I carried you, 'cause I was paid to throw you like a sack of grain, and I didn't like how that sounded." She didn't touch the coffee, but her eyes flicked to it. "You coulda left me in that wagon," she said after a long moment. "Yeah." He sat on the edge of the chair. "Could've, but I didn't." She finally looked at him then. Her eyes were darker than he'd expected, deep brown, almost black, ringed with sleeplessness and something older than her years. "I don't have anywhere to go," she whispered. "That makes two of us," he said. By the third day, she was helping around the cabin. Quiet, always quiet. She swept the floor even though it was already clean. She peeled potatoes with careful hands. She folded his shirts, and once, even tried mending one. He didn't stop her, but he didn't ask either. They didn't talk much except for small things. "Chickens need water. Storm might roll in tonight. I boiled extra coffee." But her presence filled the room like music with no sound. She was there, and she wasn't afraid of him. Not exactly, but she watched him like a dog that had been kicked too many times, waiting, always waiting, for something to go wrong. Eli noticed it most when he reached for something too fast. She'd flinch, just slightly, like a memory moved through her body before her mind could stop it. He hated that. On the fifth day, she asked if she could sleep in the barn. He blinked. "Why? It's more proper." He stood there, holding a sack of feed, looking at her like she'd spoken Apache. "I ain't touched you," he said flatly. "I know. Then don't treat me like I have." Her shoulders tightened. She stared at the floor. "I don't want to be looked at like something to be bought." He swallowed, set the feed down, sat on the porch rail, arms folded. "I don't look at you like that, Willa." "You did." He frowned. "In the beginning. At the wagon." He remembered, his hand on her arm, the way she'd winced when the coins dropped into his palm. "You're right," he said softly. She looked up, surprised. "I did look at you like that, but I changed my mind. Mid-step." Her eyes filled again, but she turned away. He didn't press, just said, "Barn's yours if you want it. But the bed stays made and the coffee stays hot. That won't change." She nodded, and that night, she slept in the hay, even though the wind howled like wolves were nearby. A week later, a man rode up. Eli was chopping wood when he saw the rider crest the hill. Black coat, square shoulders, slow gait. Willa saw him too, out the kitchen window, and dropped the kettle. "No," she whispered. "No, no." Eli didn't ask, just handed her the shotgun from behind the stove. "You know him?" She nodded. "He's the one who sold me." Eli nodded once, turned toward the rider. The cabin was quiet when he returned, but not asleep. Laney sat curled up on the floor near the fire, wrapped in his old coat like a shield, her knees drawn up to her chest. The flickering light made her look both older and younger, a child in posture, but with the eyes of someone who'd seen too much. Jace stepped in, brushing the snow off his shoulders. His boots thudded softly against the wooden floor. She didn't flinch this time, but she didn't look up either. "I brought something back," he said gently, placing a tin box down on the table. Not much. Town's about dry. But there's coffee and a bit of beef. Sugar cubes too, if you like those. Silence. He didn't push it. Just took his time unwrapping the goods, placing each item with care like he was setting a table for a guest that might never eat. When he finally looked up, he saw her watching him. You always do that? She asked, voice scratchy like a worn fiddle string. Talk soft to folks who don't talk back? He gave a half smile. Only when they've been hurt bad. That sat between them for a while. Not heavy, not light, just real. I didn't think you'd come back, she said, eyes lowering. Jace's expression didn't change. I told you I would. Men say a lot of things. He knelt down by the fire, not close enough to crowd her, but near enough she could feel his presence. What they did to you, the men in that wagon, it doesn't define you, and it doesn't decide what happens next. She turned her face away. You don't know what they said, what they did, what I was worth to them. He leaned forward, voice low and certain. They were wrong. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back, biting her lip like it would stop the shaking inside her. They said I was too much trouble to sell, that I talked too much, so they gagged me and kept me tied. Gave me to that traitor like I was rotten wheat. I believe you, Jace said. No one ever has, she whispered. He didn't say anything after that, just quietly stirred the fire, then stood and started preparing coffee. Let her sit with the weight of her own truth, not in shame, but in peace. Later, he offered her a tin cup, warm with strong brew. She took it carefully, her hands still trembling. Why do you care? What do you want from me? Nothing, he said. I just think a person ought to be able to sit by a fire and feel safe. No one's ever given me that without expecting something back. Jace sipped his own coffee. Then maybe it's time someone did. That night, she slept in his bed again, but not because she was afraid, because she asked. Can I stay close? She'd said, barely above a breath. Just for tonight. Jace had nodded. He laid a blanket down for himself on the floor without another word. In the morning, she was the one by the stove boiling water. He rubbed his eyes, surprised. You don't have to. I know, she said, but I want to. Her hands moved slowly, carefully. She was still stiff, still bruised, but she moved like someone remembering they had a body again. A life. You slept on the floor, she said quietly as he sat up. I said I would. You always keep your word? He looked at her. I try. Lainey nodded, turning back to the stove. It matters. That day, they worked side by side. Jace mended a fence. She swept the porch and folded the clean clothes he'd forgotten on the line days ago. It was slow, awkward, not without silence. But it was something like living. At one point, she brought out his old rifle, half cleaned, half curious. You know how to shoot? He asked. She shook her head. They never let me. Said girls were only useful for other things. Want to learn? She hesitated, then nodded. He took her out back and set up cans on the old fence rail. Here, he said, guiding her stance gently, never touching her without permission. Hold it like this. Keep your elbow up. That's it. She missed the first shot, and the second, but on the third, the can clanged and tumbled to the dirt. Lainey gasped, her face lighting up for the first time. I did it. You sure did, Jace said, smiling. She looked at him, eyes shining. Later that evening, as the sun sank low and painted the hills in gold, Lainey sat beside him on the porch. They didn't talk much, just sipped coffee and listened to the wind. After a long pause, she spoke. What happens now? Jace glanced at her. What do you want to happen? I don't know, she admitted. I don't have anywhere to go. He looked straight ahead. You got a place here, as long as you want it. She went quiet again, then whispered, You mean that? I don't say what I don't mean. Lainey leaned her head on the porch post, her voice softer now. I don't think I know how to be anything. Not anymore. Jace set his cup down. You don't have to be anything yet. Just be. That's enough. A long silence followed, not heavy this time, but light. Like maybe the wind wasn't just cold anymore, but carrying something forward. The night deepened over Wyoming territory, blanketing the open plains in chilled silence. Inside the worn old barn, the lantern's golden glow pooled gently over the hay-strewn floor, flickering across Callan's face as he stirred from a shallow, uneasy sleep. His hand instinctively reached out, not for his rifle, but to the spot beside him where the girl had been. Empty. He bolted upright. A gust of wind slipped through the slats of the barn wall, cold and bitter. Callan stood fast, boots thudding softly on the ground as he crossed to the barn door and pulled it open. His breath caught. There, just beyond the fence post, under the broken moonlight, she stood barefoot in the frost-kissed grass. Her long brown dress fluttered against her legs like a torn sail. She stared up at the stars with the same stillness he'd seen in dear moments before they bolt. He approached slowly. "You'll freeze," he said gently. She didn't look at him. "You planning on walking somewhere?" he asked. She tilted her head a fraction, as if she were listening to something beyond the silence. "My mother used to say the stars had names, that they watched over us when no one else did." Callan paused beside her, eyes scanning the horizon. "She sounds like she had a good heart. She died when I was 8, she said quietly. "I kept her name. That's all I had." He swallowed. "You never told me it." She turned to face him now. Her lips parted, voice cracking as she whispered, "Marybelle." It hit him like a fist to the chest. Not the name, but the sound of it, the way it carried something long buried. "That's a name worth carrying," he said. Marybelle looked down at her hands, red from cold. "You should have just dropped me in town, taken your coin and left me there." "I don't want their coin." "Why?" He hesitated, staring into her face. Tired, bruised, but no longer lifeless. "Because I've done enough things for money that left me rotten inside. I didn't want you to be one of them." She searched his eyes, looking for the lie, but there wasn't one. Only silence again, thick and raw between them. "I ain't got much," he said softly, "but I've got a roof, some tools, and a mule with no manners. You stay, you can have the bed. I'll sleep in the barn." She gave a half-smile, faint as a breeze. "You'd really sleep out here in this cold?" Callan shrugged. "Warmer than where you were a week ago." A silence passed. Then she whispered, "I'll cook." He blinked. "What?" "If I stay," she said, "I'll cook. I ain't strong, but I can boil beans and maybe stitch a button." Callan's chest tightened. He didn't need her to cook. He didn't need anything from her. But the fact that she wanted to offer, that was different. "That'll do," he murmured. They walked back to the barn together. She leaned slightly against his side, like her legs weren't ready to carry her alone yet. He didn't speak of it, just slowed his steps to match hers. The days that followed didn't unfold like magic. They came slow, awkward, stumbling. Marybelle didn't say much, but she worked. She cleaned his dusty shelves, aired the old quilt, and stood long hours at the stove trying to remember how to make bread. Some days it failed and they laughed. Some days it came out like a brick and they laughed harder. She slept on the cot by the window, where the light came in soft each morning. And each day, she seemed a little more present. Her shoulders straightened. Her voice returned. Her eyes met his without flinching. One morning, Callan came in from chopping wood to find her humming while kneading dough. She looked up, flour smudged across her cheek, and smiled. He forgot what he came in for. "You ever think of leaving?" he asked that evening. As they sat on the porch watching the sun fall behind the hills, Marybelle rocked slowly in the old chair. "Sometimes, my feet still twitch at night like they're trying to walk somewhere. But I don't want to go." He nodded, swallowing back something heavy. "Why did they want you gone?" he asked finally. Her voice went flat. "Because I wouldn't do what they said. I was supposed to marry a man twice my age. He had land, money. They thought he'd make me behave. And you didn't?" "No." I said no. Callan's hands clenched on the arms of his chair. "They tried to sell you for that?" Marybelle nodded. That wagon wasn't my first, just the last. He stood then, walked away from the porch into the dimming light. He needed the air. The rage that bloomed in his chest scared even him. Not just at them, but at the world that allowed it. That still did. Later that night, she joined him in the barn. Said nothing, just stood by the door. "You can sit," he said. She did. "I think I need to leave the county," he murmured. "They'll come looking eventually. If they think I took what they paid me to get rid of." Maribel met his eyes. "Where would you go?" "North. Maybe into the Dakotas. I know a friend there. He owes me a barn and a bottle. I'll go with you." He blinked. "You sure?" She nodded. "I never had a place. But if you're going, I'd rather go than stay." There wasn't a kiss. No music. Just two quiet people in a dark barn deciding that the road ahead might hurt. But it'd hurt less if they walked it together. The sky above the ranch glowed amber as the last light of day melted into twilight. Birds dipped low over the fields, and the horses in the corral had begun to settle, tails swishing lazily. Inside the cabin, the air was quiet but full, not with words, but with the warmth of things unsaid yet understood. Cole stirred the stew in the pot and glanced toward the bedroom door where she had been resting since morning. Eleanor had cried herself to sleep. The bruises on her arms were fading, but what lived behind her eyes, that was a different kind of wound. One not so easily tended with salve and rest. He looked down at his hands. Large, blistered, not gentle things. Yet when he'd carried her from that wagon, her face swollen, her hands tied, her dignity stripped by the laughter of men, he hadn't thought, just moved. Moved like his soul had decided something before his mind could catch up. A soft creak came from the floorboards. He turned. She stood there barefoot, her dress loose around her slight frame, but her back straight. "I didn't mean to sleep so long," she said, voice still hoarse. "You needed it," he replied simply. "The stew's almost ready." She nodded, but she didn't move toward the table. Instead, she looked out the window at the open prairie, endless and wide, as if waiting to be claimed. "I never said thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to. I want to." He set the wooden spoon down and wiped his hands on a cloth, but didn't walk closer. "You know," she continued, turning to face him fully, "when they threw me in that wagon, I kept thinking, if I survive this, I'll never trust anyone again. Ever." Cole lowered his eyes. "But then you climbed up. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't call me names or look away. You just lifted me up like I was worth saving." He felt his throat tighten. "I don't know how to repay that," she said. "You're not supposed to." Her eyes glistened. "But I want to." A long silence passed between them, soft as falling dusk. Finally, she stepped forward. "Will you teach me to live here?" His brows lifted. "Here? You sure? I want to work, learn. I don't want to be handed anything. But I want to stay where someone saw me and didn't look away." He gave a small nod. "You can muck stalls, feed the hens, mend the fence. It's not easy. I've survived worse," she said. He almost smiled. They sat together to eat. No loud words. No grand declarations. Just spoonfuls of warmth shared in quiet, like two people who had seen too much and still dared to reach toward something soft. Weeks passed. Eleanor grew stronger. She walked straighter. Her laugh, rare, bird-like, had started to return. She helped around the ranch. The hens didn't like her much at first, and she'd screamed the first time one flew at her. But now she tossed feed with a soft hum under her breath. Cole built her a proper room. Not because she asked, she hadn't, but because it felt right. One day, while fixing the barn door, a rider approached. Cole straightened. His hand instinctively touched the rifle leaning against the hay barrel. But the man raised a hand in peace. "Name's Sheriff Caldwell," he called out. Cole's jaw tensed. "What do you want?" "I got word a girl was taken from a wagon train near Sweetwater." "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Cole stepped forward. "She wasn't taken. She was dumped. Like trash." The sheriff dismounted. "That may be, but her father's been asking questions. Claims a man kidnapped his daughter." Cole didn't flinch. He sold her for debt. The sheriff didn't argue. He looked toward the house. She inside. She's safe, Cole said, calm but firm. I need to talk to her. Cole hesitated, then gave a slow nod. Only if she wants to. Inside, Eleanor stepped out after hearing the exchange. The sheriff greeted her gently. Ma'am, sorry to bother you. Just trying to clear things up. She looked him in the eye. My name is Eleanor Wade. That man you're talking about? He's not my father. He gave up that right when he traded me like I was a bag of flour. I understand, the sheriff said quietly. I'm not pressing charges, she added. But I'm not going back. The sheriff sighed. That's fair. I'll file it as closed. No questions asked. He tipped his hat and left. That night, Cole found her on the porch, staring at the stars. You all right? He asked. She nodded. Feels good, being believed. He leaned on the post next to her. You've got a future here, Eleanor. She looked up at him. What kind of future? He didn't answer right away. But then he said, one you choose. She smiled softly. Can I choose you in it? His chest rose slowly. You already have. 3 years later, the ranch buzzed with noise. Chickens squawking, cattle lowing, a child's voice echoing in giggles from the side of the house. Cole stepped out with a bucket in hand, only to be tackled at the knees by a little girl with a braid down her back. Papa! He scooped her up. You supposed to be help pin your ma with the eggs. She said I could find you first. Eleanor emerged from the coop, her hands dusted with hay, her belly round again with their second child. You spoil her, he teased. You started it, he shot back, grinning. She walked over and kissed his cheek. You carried me like a bride that day. He looked at her. You still are. She smiled, tucking her head into his shoulder. And behind them, their home stood, not just made of wood and stone, but of choices and second chances, and the quiet redemption that only love can build.